and welcome to a special edition of Power Play. I'm Bashi Capellos, coming to you once again this evening from a hotel just north of downtown Toronto. This is where federal cabinet has been convening over the past few days. Their focus, double in nature. First on, of course, our trade war with the United States and how our economy will augment itself in response to that. The second focus very much on other issues that matter a lot to Canadians, namely housing and affordability. Ministers haven't been saying a lot about what they're meeting on, but they have said this. Take a listen.
We're going to focus on the big thing. You know, the big thing is about the budget. The big thing is about the economy. The big thing is about affordability. The big thing is about housing.
People want us to be in action mode. And I think that there is urgency, and particularly when it comes to the economy.
We're open to having conversations that we think will put Canadian workers and the Canadian economy in a better position than we're in right now.
That's what ministers are saying to Canadians about what's on the agenda here at this cabinet retreat. My colleague, CTV News national correspondent Judy Trinh, has been covering sort of the minutia of what is coming up. There's not a lot, right? It's very clamped down, more so than any. I think I was saying that earlier. I've covered like 12 or 13 of these. I've never seen ministers say so little or run as fast from cameras. They really have a lot of message control at the moment. One thing that has come up is this idea yesterday that Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, said that it would be an austerity budget coming up in October and an investment budget. Lots of questions for the Finance Minister today, about what that means.
Mm-hmm. Well, Vashi, you know that the budget will be tabled in October, and it's going to be the Finance Minister's role to do that. So he was asked specifically, how can you do both? They seem to be in contradiction of each other. And what he said is that Canadians would understand. They've been belt tightening, and they expect the federal government to do so as well. You know, just some numbers for us to focus on. In 2015, there were roughly 267,000 public servants. As of June 2025, 367,000. So 100,000 more public servants working in the federal government.
Yeah, the key question to me, to Minister Champagne, was, does that mean, when you say austerity, you know, you've promised not to cut transfers, for example, to the provinces, no big program cuts, so does that mean that there will therefore be cuts to the public service? He didn't say no, there won't be, and he used instead the word adjustments, which tells me there will be.
There will be, yes. I think that he is, in everything that he has signaled, there will be. And their focus, it's in what he says other than using the word cuts, you know, what Mark Carney has said.
He went out of his way not to say cuts or austerity today,
But he said unsustainable. He repeated that again, right? The growth has been unsustainable. We no longer need, he gave the focus on the fact that, you know, we are out of COVID. We needed a growth in that sector in public service to deal with that crisis, but we are no longer in the pandemic. And you have seen recently cuts to the Public Health Agency. We are also seeing cuts to the National Library and Archives, right? But at the same time, federal unions will say this is not just risky, it's reckless. Look what's happening at the Canada Revenue Agency. People can't get their calls there. They're waiting for hours because there are not enough people. So how can you cut?
So that's the balancing act, certainly. I also wanted to look ahead to tomorrow's announcement, because I think the question for a lot of Canadians when they look at a retreat like this, I know they're not calling it a retreat, but a planning forum, like what are you planning for? What are you going to announce that you're actually going to do, not just talk about, to impact my life as a Canadian? And what I can tell you about, and what I can tell everyone watching about what I've learned about tomorrow, is that it is an announcement that will affect a lot of different sectors. It is aimed at responding in part to the trade war with the United States, but also increasing our competitiveness here in Canada. And I am told that a pretty significant Trudeau-era policy in the EV mandates that are in place, basically to get rid of all, you know, gas cars by 2035, that it could be announced tomorrow, that as part of this big announcement, that they will review that mandate. That is part and parcel. So I think, you know, sectoral supports, increasing competitiveness, canola might be a part of it as well. What does that all tell you?
That tells me that they are hoping to find ways of generating more jobs. Perhaps if it's not going to be in EV, which the U.S. government is not supporting of, you know, will it be in perhaps traditional cars? But it also begs the question, how are they going to pay for these sectoral supports? Vashi, let's not forget that before Mark Carney decided to drop the counter tariffs against the U.S., before he decided to drop the digital services tax, tax. Those are billions and billions and billions of dollars that he said we would put into sectoral dealing with helping businesses affected. So.
Lots of questions for tomorrow.
That's right.
Looking forward to it. Okay, thanks a lot, Judy.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. It's TV National News correspondent Judy Trin. Judy had a really good question actually for the Prime Minister yesterday about, in light of the trade issues with the United States, would we be looking to other countries, in particular China, right? Because it's not black and white, it's not a simple case. I want to play for you what the Prime Minister said.
We have differences with China, different approaches to a variety of things. But they are our second largest trading partner. And there are areas where we can cooperate. And we will look to potentially expand those areas for cooperation that are in ways that are consistent with our values and are in the interests of Canadians.
So those comments from the Prime Minister came yesterday. Today, that was followed up with an announcement from, or a release from his office, saying that his parliamentary secretary, an MP from Nova Scotia, Cody Bloys, would accompany the Premier of Saskatchewan and his delegation to China later this week on a trade mission. China has levied very punishing tariffs on the canola industry in particular. And we are joined now for more information on that trade mission by Saskatchewan's Premier Scott Moe. Premier Moe, pleasure to welcome you back to our program. Thanks for making the time.
Good to see you, Bessie.
I wanted to start off and ask about sort of the objective of your trade mission to China, and in particular, if the goal of the trip is to get the tariffs on canola removed, and whether China has given you any indication that that is a possibility.
That would be ideal. That being said, I don't know that there's going to be a subnational leader, including myself, that will have the opportunity at the end of a couple days in China, even with the parliamentary secretary, Cody Bloy, with me, to stand up with President Xi and say, we have removed the trade disagreements that we have. The goal of the trip, I think, more realistically, is for us to pull forward any opportunity for Canada and China, or our Prime Minister and President Xi, to actually have that conversation on not only canola, pulses, pork, and seafood, and removing potentially those tariffs, but actually, what does the trade relationship look like more broadly between Canada and China moving forward? And that's the relationship and the conversation that I think needs to happen. And what we're trying to do is to pull that conversation forward so that it happens sooner rather than later.
And is it your view, or has it been communicated to you, that the federal government, that the Prime Minister in particular, wants that conversation to happen?
I've been in constant conversation, not only with the Prime Minister, but a number of other elected ministers, MPs, as well as some unelected folks that are working in and around the PMO's office and the government. We've been quite, I think pleased. We'd like to see, obviously, everything happen sooner, but quite pleased with the engagement that we have, not only from the Prime Minister, but for example, the announcement of Cody Bloy joining us on our mission on very short notice, as we'll be leaving on Saturday to find our way to China. Ideally, it would be great if this all just went away tomorrow, but it is going to take some work and it is going to take some time. And it is going to take subnational governments or provincial governments like myself working alongside and supporting our federal government, because it is going to be the government of China and its leader, and the government of Canada and our leader, that ultimately are going to bring this broader trade relationship to a head. We want that to happen as soon as possible.
So I know for people watching, many of them understand kind of the back and forth between China and Canada that led to these tariffs on canola and other agricultural products, as you put it. But for those who aren't aware, last year Canada put tariffs on Chinese-made EVs, and a large part of the response from China is to do with that. It is in response, I should say, to those initial tariffs. They've also brought in, claims of, anti-dumping and things like that. But, primarily it's about the electric vehicle tariffs. I know that you have put forward the view that those tariffs should be removed, so that the tariffs that apply to sectors in your province could also be removed at the same time. But the initial tariffs that we put in place were there for a reason, Premier, right? They were there because we were working in concert with the United States, because China is heavily subsidizing the sector and our own industry couldn't compete. Is it really a good decision to even put that on the table?
Yeah, and my words were, if it was only Saskatchewan's decision, certainly we would have those tariffs removed. However, it is not. There are actually indirect and direct consequences to any decision like that. For example, our largest market, our largest canola market, and as a matter of fact, is not China; it's the United States of America. And we put on tariffs on steel, aluminum, and EVs to align ourselves with the United States of America. And so, herein lies the challenge of the dance that we need to perform as Canadians and as a Canadian government, and we need to support this effort in preserving our largest market for canola. I'll speak to specifically, which is the United States of America, but also having access to our second largest market, which is in China, as well as many other markets around the world. This is a consequence of a president that is very much working to reset the United States of America's trade relationship with many countries all at once, and so there's direct and indirect impacts, and we have to be in the middle of those conversations. And what we are doing is trying to bring that particular conversation with China forward so that it happens sooner rather than later. But this is not an environment that isn't riddled with challenges and balances and gives and takes for all industries. It's ours, unfortunately, the canola industry, that's being impacted at the moment.
And certainly I wouldn't want to take away from the impact on the canola industry or the other agricultural sectors that are being impacted. But just to be clear on your position, when I understand that you're there to articulate the interests of your province, but do you want the federal government, for example, to actually do that? Like, it isn't just Saskatchewan that would be impacted. Do you want them to remove the EV tariffs? And how will that play with the United States at a time where you just pointed out how important that export market is? I think we exported more in June to Texas than we did to all of China. So if we all of a sudden get offside with the United States, which is still very adversarial with China when it comes to trade, like, is that really a wise decision in the long run, even if in the short term it does help canola producers?
There's a different way for this, to find its way to a resolution. Let's support Dominic LeBlanc in his efforts to find some certainty in our trade relationship with the United States of America, and then we will know precisely how we can engage with a country like China in very short order. And so we have this instability in our U.S. trading partner. We have instability now in our trading partner of our markets that we have been able to access in China. And I'd say there's some instability in other markets around the world as well. And so the sooner that we're able to get to a place of certainty, at least for the time being, with the United States of America, our largest trading partner both ways, I think it's going to provide us a framework for how we're going to be able to engage with countries like China. Our whole goal is to bring the entirety of that conversation, whether it be with the USA, whether it be with China or other markets. Let's try to bring that bring that about as quickly as possible to provide certainty for the industries that are creating jobs and creating wealth. And we're starting to see some economic indicators, not only south of the 49th parallel, but now in Canada, that are, telling us we need a resolution to all of these trade-related challenges right now.
And I certainly would agree that the data would lead us to tell a story of let's get out of this mess. But with great respect, I have to ask, that vision that you present of certainty with the United States, I think would sound like fantasy to a lot of Canadians right now.
Well, I hope it isn't fantasy. They're our largest trading partner, and it needs to become reality very, very quickly. And I know Minister LeBlanc is doing his level best, as is the Prime Minister, engaging with the Trump administration and the President directly. But we do need that certainty. We've always been quite straightforward and quite blunt with Saskatchewan's view about the importance of our non-tariff trading relationship with a country like the United States of America, but also the importance for us to have access in those markets abroad. Our province of 1.25 million exports to over 160 countries around the world. We're the largest per capita exporting region in North America. And so, these trade-related challenges are not entirely new to our province of Saskatchewan. However, they're on more products, they're at a deeper level in more countries. And so this is, a challenging conversation for our federal government. And that's why you see me, and you haven't seen me the last 10 years, coming out and supporting a federal liberal government in the efforts and the initiatives in this international space. But I certainly am today, and I wish them every success, because a success for Canada today is certainly a success for all 10 provinces and the 3 territories and all of the Canadians from coast to coast to coast. And so we're doing our level best to find a much more certain trading environment with all of our partners around the world, and to support our federal government in doing so. And that's a new space for me.
You're right. It feels like a little bit of an alternate universe, even in my interviewing you at this time. I have just one final question for you, Premier, and it's actually kind of jumping off what you mentioned about the federal government, and it's something that I think a lot of Canadians will listen to as we hear the Prime Minister say that he's looking for an expanded trade relationship. I'm paraphrasing, but essentially what he said with China. As we hear you talk about, your endeavors with China, I'm not negating the potential significance of China as a trading partner, and in particular as an export market, given its size. But what we also heard from this Prime Minister, someone who is briefed at the highest level of national security during the federal election campaign, when he was asked during the debate, what is the biggest security threat to this country? His answer was China. How do you reconcile for Canadians who hear that and are worried about our national security that we should kind of turn a blind eye and instead increase our trade with a partner that we just said was the biggest threat to our national security?
It's commodity-based sales is simply what it is. We're selling them canola oil, canola meal, potash, things of that nature. We are the larger, I believe Saskatchewan is the largest exporter, not only into China, but also into countries like India. And if we're truly going to in any way diversify additional production away from the United States of America, for example, Europe is, yes, one of those markets. Many of the ASEAN countries are some of those markets as well. But it is going to have to include India and China. They're some of the largest, populous countries in the world and some of the largest economies in the world. And so we are going to have to separate some of the other conversations that we have with countries from where we are selling our products, around the world. And maybe we can. We have been able to in the years gone by, but we should at least engage to find out whether or not we can. And that's what Parliamentary Secretary Cody Beloy and myself will be trying to open up those conversations as we move forward. You may be right. There may not be a path there, and maybe eternally changed our relationship, not only with China, but the United States of America. We're going there to find out.
Okay, Premier, I will leave it on that note. Safe travels. Hope to talk to you on your return. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Vashi.
Scott Moe is the Premier of Saskatchewan. I'm going to take a quick commercial break right here on Power Play. On the other end of that break, we've got a lot to talk about what is happening here, what isn't happening here at this cabinet retreat. We have a very stacked front bench for you on this Thursday evening. Christy Clark, Marco Mendicino, James Moore, and Rana Ambrose will be here in just 2 minutes. Stay right there.
The Prime Minister was right when he said over the last years you've seen an increase in spending of about 7%. That's not sustainable. Folks at home understand that. So folks at home have been tightening their belt for quite some time. They said, if I do it, the government has to do it as well.
He's doing neither investment nor austerity. What he's doing is even more bureaucracy and spending. As I said, it's all a show. Forget what comments he makes in press conferences. Focus on what he's actually done, which is to make the government more expensive.
Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne, followed by federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, both responding to questions from reporters today about something the Prime Minister said yesterday in French. He said that the budget that will be tabled in October will be both an austerity budget and an investment budget. Here to talk a little bit more about what that might mean heading into the fall is a brand new edition of the Front Bench. I'm really excited for this one. Former BC Premier Christy Clark is with us tonight. She's a senior advisor with Bennett Jones now. Marco Mendicino is former Chief of Staff to Prime Minister Mark Carney and, of course, a former Liberal cabinet minister under a number of different portfolios. Former Conservative Industry Minister James Moore is here. He's now a senior business advisor with Dentons. And Rana Ambrose is former leader of the Conservative Party and now deputy chairwoman at TD Securities. Hi, everybody. Very nice to see you.
Hello.
Thanks for making time tonight
Nice to be back.
for this. Christy, I'm going to start with you. What do you think of the fact that the Prime Minister used the word austerity, even at all, to describe a budget? Like, my history with politicians is that they run from that word, no matter what party they're in, because Canadians get worried about what it means for them. Do you think it was deliberate, a mistake, and what do you think it signifies?
Well, personally, I was thrilled to hear him use the word. It's about time. The civil service has grown by 100,000 people on Justin Trudeau's watch. If he takes out 15%, which is what they're talking about for each ministry, that still only gets us down to the level where after Justin Trudeau had been Prime Minister for 5 years. So we're still talking 2020 numbers in terms of the growth of the civil service. So I think it's great that he's talking about doing that, and not an easy task. But, you know, I think what he's saying to Canadians is, look, as Francois-Philippe Champagne said, we understand that you guys are having a tough time. We understand that Canadians are trying to tighten their own belts. Government is going to do the same thing, and they're going to stop the growth, and they're going to try and contain the civil service. And I think it's absolutely the right message for Canadians.
Rana, what do you think of sort of the priming of the pump, so to speak, in the way in which we did hear the finance minister today kind of, you know, try and say, like, hey, we know it's hard times, Canadians know it's hard times, that is why you might be you might end up seeing what you see in October. Does that kind of framing, you think, lay the groundwork to introduce something that Canadians might not be used to over the past number of years, if in fact that's what they plan on doing?
They might not be used to it, but they're ready for it and they want it. I mean, that is just one piece of what we need to see in this budget. I mean, the government, the economy is shrinking. It's not just doing badly, it's shrinking. It's going in the wrong direction. Core inflation is still high, and unemployment is at 7%. Youth unemployment is at a 30-year high. You know, investment confidence is at a low. Getting rid of the bloated bureaucracy is table stakes. This should have been done in a spring budget. We're waiting for that to be done. I hope everyone wants that done. And as Christy said, we welcome that. Everyone should welcome that. But that's just one piece of the puzzle. Canadians are worried about their jobs. They're worried about healthcare. They're worried about their kids. Yesterday, numbers were shared. 78% of Canadians think their kids will be financially worse off than them. So they don't see a future, a bright future. So the economy has to be completely reset. And it has to be done as soon as possible, which means in this budget. So I hope we're going to cut government because it's massive and it's bloated and it's expensive and it's been ineffective in delivering a strong economy. And then the other piece is the investment. And I sure hope we're not going to just see a bunch of subsidies managed corporations and industries. We need to reignite innovation and reignite the small business sector. So I'm expecting a lot of bold moves in this budget, and I really hope we see it.
Can I ask Marco just like a question about, in particular, like the language and the idea that what they sort of communicated today was that the minister used the word adjustments when it came to the public service. Like, everybody is asking if there's going to be austerity, will it come at the expense of the public service? Because, as you know, both Christy and Rana pointed out, there is certainly information out there about how the size of that public service has grown. My experience covering this kind of thing is, it's easier at times to signal you'll do it than actually do it. And, you know, saying you're going to cut through attrition is very different than actually laying people off and dealing with unions. So I wondered, from your perspective, how challenging you anticipate that aspect of things to be.
Yeah, look, I agree with many elements of what both Rana and Christy have said. And I think your question really touches on the fundamental choices that have to be made in this process. And I've always known the Prime Minister to be very careful and deliberate in the language that he uses. And colloquially, during the course of his time in government, he's talked about investing more and spending less. And I think when he used the word austerity, he was really evoking the spending less part. And so there will be some, I think, tough choices that do need to be made. But I think the more positive side to the budget narrative will be around investing in major projects. And I would just pick up on your last guest, you know, Scott Moe, Doug Ford, Danielle Smith. A lot of premiers have rallied around the idea of reducing internal trade barriers, building projects that will help to spur on the kind of growth and prosperity that will help to drive a lot of those positive macroeconomic numbers that we all want to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny because I was just, as Marco mentioned, I just interviewed Premier Mo, and as I said during the interview, as he conceded, it felt like an alternate universe. I've never heard him in 10 years of interviewing him be so positive about the federal government, but I'll set that aside for a second. James, your thoughts on the characterization of the budget at this juncture and what that might mean for follow-through, might mean or not mean for follow-through come October?
Well, I think the economics of this is incredibly tough, but I also think the politics of this will be tough for the Prime Minister to sort of tell the story that he's trying to sell. He has been lent a lot of progressive voters, and he's going to have to explain to them what it is that he's actually delivering here if he's actually going to rationalize federal government spending in a way that needs to be done, as Rana put it so well. In my lifetime, I don't know that there's been a federal budget with higher expectations, right? You know, we're going to spend more, but we're going to invest. We're going to cut waste, but only on the operations side. We're going to invest more. We're going to be everybody seems to be getting everything, and I don't know that they've primed the pump quite adequately enough for those people who are probably going to be disappointed in a lot of ways. Hopefully, in a way that's accretive to more responsible fiscal spending. You know, as a former president of the United States once said, being all things to all people means being nothing to no one. And he seems to be sort of getting everybody excited about what's going to be the outcome of this budget. But you know, an important point I think was made by Pierre Poilievre there in the opening clip that you showed, right? Which is, you know, for well over a decade, frankly, going back even into the Conservative government, we've been, you know, Canadians have just seen a ramping up of federal government spending, right? We have an economic action plan in response to the Great Recession, and then Justin Trudeau came in with all kinds of promises, and then we had Donald Trump come in 2016, and boy, we got to protect the Canadian economy, got to spend more, and then COVID came, and boy, we got to spend some more, and then the coming out of COVID and the Great Reset, boy, we got to spend more money there, and then we've had now, you know, a decade and a half of just more and more and more spending, and the government has gotten less and less efficient. They come into the office 3, maybe 4 days a week, and it just is not working. And I hope there's a great reset in the right way so that we can have the fiscal room to do the things that we need to do to make sure the Canadian economy is actually genuinely more competitive and not just being sort of, you know, cash out the door in order to sort of cash manage a government in a way that is just trying to survive a minority parliament.
I guess what I wonder, though, and you're all kind of in agreement that something like that is necessary, Christy, is like if Canadians have spent all this time acclimating to the idea of higher government spending, and ultimately, I remember the election where former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said, you know, we will run I didn't end up being moderate, but we will run a moderate deficit. It didn't cost him any votes. Instead, it ended up costing Tom Mulcair votes when he said he wanted to balance the budget. Like, when we've become so acclimated to higher levels of spending and the programs that delivers in many cases, or the services, like, I sort of come back to the idea of like the politics of it is very difficult. I understand that Canadians get how hard the times are, but when it translates to something tangible, less in their lives, I wonder how much fortitude it takes in a government to actually stick by that, and whether you think this one will have it.
I'm not sure that there's going to be a huge public cost for this. I mean, think about it. The federal government has thousands and thousands of people working in departments that have ministries in every government across the country. Healthcare, environment, natural resources. I think we could do with a few less bureaucrats in those kinds of ministries where really you don't need 100 people looking after the climate change file from the federal government in PEI. So I think there's real room there for lots of the flab to kind of get cut out of government over time. But I think it is important, though, that we also remember when the government talks about spending money, they are talking about spending money on infrastructure and the tools for economic growth. So, you know, like we started trying to build an LNG industry in British Columbia in 2011. We finally got to final investment decision in 2017. And now it's shipping. It created 100,000 jobs. That's tax money. It goes in to pay for healthcare and education. And it comes out of your capital budget. So when we think about this, the austerity on one side with a leaner government, and then on the other side, more government spending on projects that are going to put people to work, create tax revenue for governments, and mean that that Canada finds its way back to growth, because you can't grow if you don't invest.
Last word to you, Ron. I've just got it on this segment. I've just got a minute. I understand the macro argument about investing in projects, even let's say of TMX, but that can be a difficult sell in the moment to Canadians? Like, how important do you think it is that the government, when they announce whatever they're going to do when it comes to major projects, for example, really drills down into how like it affects me in my life versus just like there will be all this job creation, there will be a return on investment? Like, how specific do they have to get?
Well, and it's also going to take time. Major projects take time. I mean, look at the TMX or TMC. It took years to build and billions of dollars in tax. I think the difference is you've got a prime minister that is all about top down, right? And that's what I want to see change in this budget. We've had this sort of top down management of the economy. We're going to subsidize, we're going to manage industries, we're going to do what we need to do to keep our industries protected, not innovating, not competing. And what that's done is it's left some of our industries really lackluster results, job losses. They are now really exposed to the trade issues from the United States. We're losing people to the US. I would like to see Mark Carney say, I believe in small businesses. I believe in the potential of investors to have confidence in this economy. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to deregulate. We're going to lower taxes, both at the capital gains level. We're going to do it on the business side, on corporations. We're going to do it on income taxes. I mean, this all costs money. I get it. But it's a different philosophy. Instead of top down and I'll pick the projects, I'll invest your tax dollars in billions. I'll figure out where the jobs are going to be, what regions they're going to go to. Instead, why don't we actually do what we need to do to reignite the economy from bottom up and let the innovators, the job creators, the investors actually make this economy work. And that's the difference. And we're going to continue, I think, with a government that believes, yes, we got to shrink the public service. Everybody's ready for it. People are fed up with the fact that they're paying so much money in taxes and they're not getting the services that they believe that they deserve and that their children deserve, especially in healthcare. So I think people are ready to see cuts in that way. But on the investment side, we need to see this economy reignited from bottom up, not top down, or at least both of those things. So, you know, we'll see what we see in the budget. And I hope we see some bold moves because we need it.
I gotta take a bold move and take a break. James and Mark, I'll get you right in after that break. We're back in just 2 minutes here on Power Play. Back in a moment with our front bench.
It is the Wild West out there. People are feeling afraid. Seniors afraid to go outside. Parents afraid to let their children play alone. Mr. Carney put on a big show that he was going to address liberal immigration. What has he done? He's kept Justin Trudeau's numbers. He's bringing in a record number of temporary foreign workers to take the jobs of Canadians.
That program has a role. It has to be focused in terms of its role. And it's part of what we're reviewing. When I talk to businesses around the country, particularly in Quebec, but elsewhere across the country, their number one issue is tariffs, and their number two issue is access to temporary foreign workers.
Welcome back to a special edition of Power Play. I'm Vashi Capellos, coming to you from a cabinet retreat, I can call it, but they're calling it a planning forum. I'm at a hotel just a little bit north of downtown Toronto. That was Pierre Poilievre in Mississauga today, and Prime Minister Mark Carney, each kind of talking about a different number of issues that have been brought up over the past few days. We've heard a lot from the Conservative leader. We've heard a lot from the Prime Minister. It's giving us a better idea of how, relative to each other, they are positioning themselves and their parties. I want to bring back the front bench to talk a bit more about how we can expect that to unfold over the fall. We've got Marco Mendicino, James Moore, Rona Ambrose, and Christy Clark here. Marco, I'll start with you. And I wanted to ask from the Liberals, from what you anticipate the Liberals' vantage point is, how significant do they think this fall the contrast between themselves and the Conservatives will be, and how you think they will frame it?
Well, I think it will be significant in several respects. First, on the economy, as we've discussed, continuing to show the pace and acceleration of getting big things done, whether it's building projects that are in the national interest, and really showcasing Canada as an energy superpower in an increasingly destabilized and multipolar trading world. But second, some of the other issues that we haven't yet discussed, but need to see progress on when it comes to building housing. Madame Joly was out earlier today talking about unveiling a new strategy when it comes to the defense manufacturing sector. So those are important substantive contrasts. But I think the other issues that where there will be contrast is in the areas of immigration and as well in law and order. And I don't think it was a coincidence that Pierre Poilievre was in Mississauga, where, you know, in the 905, we saw some of those seats swing blue because he was tapping into law and order. So I do think that the Liberal government is going to have to come out with a very robust messaging that speaks to Canadians' concerns when it comes to law and order, that works with other levels of government, both provincially and municipally, so that people who are committing crimes are being held responsible.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch, in particular, James, over the past week or so, the degree to which the Conservatives are talking about crime and the contrast, certainly, that they are saying exists between themselves and the Liberals. And we've had provincial politicians, even Doug Ford, who's not exactly like best friends with Pierre Poilievre-led Conservatives, criticizing the Liberals, which he hasn't done a lot of, but he is on this issue. How important do you think crime, for example, will be for the Conservatives in their own efforts to paint a contrast with the Liberals?
Well, I think the lived experience by most Canadians is that the weakness of the Canadian economy, especially with youth unemployment, the massive inflows, the unsustainable levels of inflows of immigration that we've had over the past decade, all of these things are combining to create an environment where crime is also running rampant. And then you add into that the fentanyl crisis, the drug crisis, and the social policies, frankly, that we've gotten wrong for a really long time. All of this has created a stew of a sense of disorder, discomfort, a lack of sort of real positivity about where the country is going, and a lack of optimism, especially amongst young Canadians. So these things are all kind of, they feed off of each other in a downward spiral that we've been on for far too long. And so I think we need to sort of approach these things, I think, bit by bit. I think, you know, if we're all going to be demanding solidarity and sort of working together cooperatively to manage the tariff consequences of Donald Trump's approach to Canada and the world, that's fine. But we need to have aggressive, clear, precise and effective debates about all of the other issues, because they all feed off each other. And so far, they've been feeding off each other in a really negative way. With regard to immigration in particular and crime in particular, there's real reason why Pierre Poilievre is talking about these issues, is because Canadians are talking about these issues and they want to see Parliament talking about these issues. And they want to see really aggressive solutions come forward in a thoughtful way. And we're long past the time that we actually talk about these things. And hopefully a fresh Parliament and a fresh mandate for the Prime Minister and Pierre Poilievre re-energized after his by-election victory will create a moment where we can actually tackle some things, because we have some breathing room, certainly over the next calendar year, to do some really important stuff and not just, focus on Donald Trump incessantly.
Yeah, if we set aside sort of the issue of Donald Trump, which I think, we can everyone, including parliamentarians, Christy, can do multiple things at once. We can focus on that and think about other things as well, because Canadians are doing that largely. What is your view on, I guess, the implications for both the Conservatives in the way in which they talk about these issues? Because they did so to a degree very successfully during the campaign, but not enough to win the election. And what is the implication, in your view, for the Liberals, who largely left a vacuum for a long time on issues around crime and immigration in certain aspects?
Yeah, well, I don't think there's any doubt that the immigration policies under the previous government didn't work. They didn't end up the way that anybody'd hoped that they would. They put huge amount of pressure on the housing market, which has had a really deleterious impact for Canadians. But there's also no doubt that this government's policy is going to be different on those issues. But first, I just want to talk about this temporary foreign workers issue, because it was funny hearing Pierre Poilievre talk about TFWs rather than immigration broadly, because if you've ever visited a small business anywhere in the country, they will tell you that they want more temporary foreign workers, especially in economies that are doing really well. So I'm not sure it's exactly the right target for Mr. Poilievre, who likes to suggest that he's the small business pro-business candidate. However, I think immigration, the federal government is going to take immigration on. They are going to cut back on the immigration numbers. They're going to do it, I think, hopefully carefully, because there are elements in immigration that we absolutely need to preserve because we need those workers. The other thing, though, I would say, listening to James talk, and he talks positively about working together in the coming years and how, recognizing that there's an existential crisis. I will just finish by adding, I sure wish we could hear some of that kind of Team Canada positive thought about working together in this existential crisis from the leader of the opposition himself, Pierre Poilievre. I mean, when you talk about shaping their messaging, he doesn't sound like he has changed one bit from the way he was during the election, and that is the reason he lost the election. If he expects if he wants to ever be prime minister, I would suggest he wants to start thinking about how he can get on the team.
Rana, I'll let you respond to that.
Yeah, I think there's nothing more important than having an accountability in Parliament and a government that's being held to account. And that's exactly what a good opposition and a strong opposition leader does. And they focus on the things that matter the most to Canadians. I know Prime Minister Carney said when he talks to businesses, they tell him that they want temporary foreign workers. I was in government. We tried to cut for a period of time, we cut the temporary foreign worker program. The truth is, the economy is in a much worse place today, and where temporary foreign workers are being accessed is in places in Canada where there's high unemployment. So this idea that it's the only people in Fort McMurray where there's lots, low unemployment and demand and you can't find anybody to work at Tim Hortons, you need a temporary foreign worker. That's not what's happening. That temporary foreign worker program, small businesses have become used to it and they've become addicted to it. It is easier for them to fill out those forms and get a temporary foreign worker for their, for their business than it is to get out there in the community and advertise their job to youth, advertise to high schools, advertise to universities. It's just easier, and it's become a program that they are addicted to a certain extent. There's no way that we should have small businesses using the temporary foreign worker program in cities and towns where there's massive youth unemployment. Don't tell me that at Tim Hortons or any of these food chains where young people could work can't get out and find a young university student that's willing to come work for $38 an hour. So look, there's places where it makes sense, where there's low unemployment and there's demand, and you just can't find anyone to work because of the pressure in the economy. Right. And we see places like that in Alberta. But that's not where it's being used exclusively. So I think Pierre has tapped into something here really important. I also think immigration is top of mind for people across the country. And I think that people are starting to relate, like James said, the immigration issue with housing, with education. There's not enough schools. They're relating it to the capacity of the healthcare system and seeing it unravel. They feel, people are saying, we raised our immigration numbers and we didn't have the capacity to absorb people, and now we need to catch up. So we need to cap those numbers. We've got to catch up. We don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the services. And people are feeling strained. And so I think Pierre is absolutely on the right track. And if the Liberals don't address these issues in the budget or signal that they're going to address them, they're not hearing what Canadians are talking about.
They have made some signals. Marco, I'll give you the last word here if you wanted to respond. Made some signals, but certainly, haven't gone as far as the Conservatives' recommendation to abolish certain programs. You mentioned crime as a particular issue to look ahead to. Do you think immigration will be as significant?
I do. And look, again, I think that there are elements of Rana's intervention that I agree with. But even in what she said, I mean, she's talking about degrees to which the temporary foreign worker program can be recalibrated. So, look, I think Pierre has tapped into something. He's tapped into something that is probably profoundly felt by a number of people who are concerned about the way in which we integrate newcomers, which is a bit of a departure from the longstanding tradition that immigration has enjoyed bipartisan support because it has been, in the long run, a net, positive contributor to the economy. And just given our domestic population and our demographics and the need to uphold things like universal health care, our pensions, other important, covenants, we do need immigration. The reforms, I think, are important. And again, this is another area where the government has put forward, I think, some very concrete recommendations. And certainly at a top line, lowering temporary immigration will be an objective. And I think at the same time, really focusing on how we can employ more young Canadians in emerging technological sectors like artificial intelligence, and upskilling and equipping them with the skills that they need so that they can compete for the jobs that will pay well, that will give them access to that affordable housing that also needs to be built. Those are the positive objectives that I think that the government is going to try to contrast with Pierre Poilievre as opposed to his more negative message.
Okay, James, I know you look like you want to jump in. I wish I'm already a minute heavy and into the commercial. I apologize. I promise we will pick it up next week. Thank you very much, everybody, for making the time for the discussion. James Moore, Marco Mendicino, Christy Clark, and Rana Ambrose. We're back in just a moment. More Power Play just ahead. Welcome back to Power Play. I want to turn to a developing story out of the province of Manitoba. Earlier this morning on Hollow Water First Nation, there was a mass stabbing of sorts. 2 people are dead, including the suspect, and 6 others were transported to hospital in Winnipeg. That's where we find my colleague, CTV Winnipeg's Joseph Bernacki, who can give us some more details about what we've learned from RCMP and also how the victims are doing.
Thanks, Vashi. Well, in the last hour and a half, the RCMP conducted a joint press conference here, just behind me here on Portage Avenue in Winnipeg, bringing harrowing details of what happened starting just after 3 a.m. this morning. RCMP got a call from a First Nation security officer from Hollow Water First Nation. The First Nation's about 2.5 hours north of Winnipeg. There's about 500 people that live on the reserve. There was reports of a stabbing around 3:15. RCMP were able to respond just after 5 a.m. Where they found multiple people injured in multiple scenes on the First Nation. Pretty harrowing details that we've been given to us throughout the day, really. A 26-year-old male suspect. Families are asking for answers why Tyrone Simard, who's been identified as the suspect, went about this rampage on the First Nation. He was pronounced dead following a collision with an RCMP officer that was investigating just south of the First Nation at Black River First Nation. The 2 vehicles collided. The suspect was pronounced dead at the scene. The officer is being treated for multiple injuries still this afternoon. A code orange was declared at Health Sciences Centre, which is our biggest hospital here in the province, which doesn't happen too often, where the victims were being treated with various injuries. I spoke with family this morning whose father was recovering from a punctured lung. His door was kicked down just after 5 a.m. this morning. The suspect had broken in, was causing havoc. And people are looking for answers. Yeah, I mean, our CTV viewers might remember 3 years ago to this day was the attack that took place in James Smith's Cree Nation in northern Saskatchewan, which had very similar details. RCMP are still looking for a motive at this time, Vashi. This is going to be an independent investigation that I imagine is going to continue for quite some time. Premier Wab Canoe and Chief Barker from the First Nation offer their condolences this afternoon, but details are still being kept close to the chest at this point. We'll bring you more details when we have it here from CTV News Winnipeg, but this has been Joseph Bernacki from the station bringing you more up-to-date coverage.
Joseph, thank you so much. I appreciate all of that update. Thank you. That's Joseph Bernacki, as he mentioned, in Winnipeg. We'll take a quick commercial break. We've got more Power Play on the other end of that break. This cabinet retreat is wrapping up, so is Power Play, at least from here in Toronto. We'll have lots more coverage into the evening and tomorrow for that big announcement from the Prime Minister on Canadian competitiveness. Lots more details to come on that. I'll leave our program there. Thanks for watching.